Hey, hey. What's up, everyone? How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's doing well. All right. So we're going to give everyone just another minute or two because usually I'm a little bit later than this. We'll start at 10 past. 10 past. That gives another minute. That gives everyone another minute. How's everyone doing? All right. All right. We got some fun things to talk about. We have some fun things to talk about today. There's a couple security incidences that I think are going to be interesting. One, I'm calling a security incident just because of how it was dealt with, or not how it was dealt with, but the result of it. It wasn't actually an attack. It was some people having some fun, but it did cause lots of problems. So it's going to go under security. Obviously, there needs to be a lot of work done there. Anyways, we have that. We have a whole brand new key coming to a keyboard near you soon. We're actually going to watch a video. It's going to blow your mind. Yeah, then we have some of our normal open source stuff. Actually, we have quite a bit of open source stuff. Something from last year that I missed. I didn't miss. I actually knew that this happened, but I don't think I ever reported it. And that's on me. That's on me. So I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna fix it. And yeah, I have a article at the very end that we're going to go over together called "Databases in 2023: A Year in Review." I haven't looked over it. Guy summarizes all the database stuff. Hopefully he hit the highlights of the best database out there. You know, there's part of me that thinks he didn't, but hopefully he did. We're going to review it, and we'll see. Okay, so who's ready for this? I'm ready. Kind of got myself too excited. All right, are you guys ready for a little video? We're just going to watch a little video first. Hope you guys like it. All right, so if you're like me and you thought that this was a hoax and they released it before April 1st, it actually is. Hey,
folks.
It actually is not. It actually is not. I actually I saw that and I was like, this cannot be. But it can be. So there is now, if you buy a Windows, there is now an AI powered key. I'm a little confused by this, to be honest. To give you my insight into this, there's already enough keys on the keyboard. In fact, most people use like an 80%er keyboard. And my thinking on this is, could you not have incorporated this into the start menu? I know on Windows you hit the Windows key and it opens the start menu. Was there too much going on there? I feel like the answer is no. I feel like you could have just put it in there. That's my feeling. What's your feeling? Let me know. This is a real thing. I don't really want another special key on standard keyboards. The super is enough for me. Anyways, I thought we'd have a little fun with that. I thought we'd start the news off with a little bit of fun. But in all seriousness, let's talk about something that not as fun. Not as fun. I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story that starts in March 2016. March 2016, LeftPad was unpublished Now, LeftPad was unpublished due to a naming dispute. I don't remember all the details about it, but this caused NPM to change its policies around unpublishing packages. Basically, the big naming change or the big policy change was basically if another package depended on you, another published package depended on you, you couldn't unpublish. That was kind of the big policy. So if it was dependent on, you couldn't unpublish it. Okay, so then in July 2018, did I remember all of these things? No, I remember pad left and colors, but I didn't actually remember these other things. I had to look all these up, just so you know. And maybe I missed some. July 2018, ESLint scope was compromised with a malicious package. That this actually uploaded the NPM credentials from whoever was using it to the attacker. Then in November of 2018, malicious package flatmap stream stole bitcoins from people. I probably covered that on the news. It was probably pretty funny to me. But then we can fast forward to January 2022. And this is where the package colors basically made changes to the colors package that printed a lot of garbled text to the screen, maybe a memorandum or something like that as well, and replaced another project called Faker with basically a big project README. I think it's called Faker. And so those were kind of the scandals of 2022. And in March of 2022, Node IPC was released that would delete files from Belarusian and Russian IP addresses. Mostly that came out of this was a fantastic lesson to the Vue project as why you should pin your versions. Yeah, that was a rough one. But it's been fairly quiet since then, right? But everything changed. Everything changed on December 29th, 2023. Everything changed. December 29th, 2023, the Everything package was released. The Everything package. Now, why was this such a big deal? Well, there was a couple things that caused this to be a big deal. There was a couple things. So the first thing that happened that caused this specifically to be a big deal was the fact that it used stars to depend on everything. And the second thing was it kind of broke everything. To the fact that they couldn't even unpublish their own everything package because of a nested cyclical dependencies. So the people who published everything couldn't even unpublish it because of everything. Now, this has been solved by GitHub. GitHub solved this because it removed the everything registry package because it went contrary to their terms and conditions. That being said, the people that actually made the package reached out to GitHub as well as NPM because this was not their intent. Their intent was not to cause trouble or any issues like that. Their intentions was just to have some fun. They thought it would be funny. Now, a lot of good discussion has come out of this, though, because there has been a lot more that goes into how NPM packages deal with dependency hell and how they deal with dependencies in general, as well as what is the role of the NPM package site. Like, how are they supposed to be handling this? We haven't had any of these major issues in Go, but Go actually could suffer from them because Go is predestined to be affected by these things due to the fact that the repos are just Git repos. So I think people should really be thinking hard on whether they just use Git repos or not, and how you deal with dependencies. Now, that being said, as of today, as of this last week, it has been cleared up. Everything has been deleted. Git solved it by removing the repository. So as you can see when you're here, it says it doesn't have a README. It did have a README. It doesn't have one because the repository was removed. And this fixed everything. But that being said, it didn't actually fix the problem. Somebody else could do this again if they wanted to. Somebody else could do this again if they wanted to. I think this brings up a very valid point, and one that not a lot of companies, but really large ones, bring up, is how do you deal with dependencies? A lot of people would use npm directly. Is that the safest thing to do? I don't know. Should people not be allowed to unpublish their packages? I don't know. I don't know the right answers to these things. Half of me would say that we should be allowed to unpublish our own stuff if we wanted to. The other half of me sees, because of things like pad left, how that could just be used as basically make the platform unusable. So the platform has to have mechanisms to protect for that. But yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. One that NPM is going to have to work on in the future. But we have one more security incident that needs to be talked about. One more issue to talk about. And this is about how to fail gracefully. How to fail gracefully. We're always going to fail at some point, and failing sucks and failing hurts. That's the life of it. But what you need to learn is to learn your lesson from your failure and then fail gracefully. Fail gracefully. And that's what 23andMe could not do. Now, I dug into this a little bit because I thought that this was pretty blatantly bad on 23andMe's part. And it turns out it's not as bad as it appears, but it's still bad. Still very bad. So let's talk about it. 23andMe blames negligent breach on victims, says it's their own fault. Now, I will contend at the very start of this that there was a very small number of people who possibly leaked their own passwords. Possibly. But there's many things, especially if you're dealing with sensitive data, that you can do to help protect these users. And I don't think 23andMe was doing those. So I would even contend that there still could have taken for the few thousand that leaked their own passwords. They could have taken the stance of, we can do better, because you can do better. That's fine. I would have expected them not to lose the lawsuit against them to those people, because those people did leak their own passwords. But the problem with this, is, let's read into this a little. Unauthorized actors managed to access certain user accounts in instances where users recycled their own login credentials, and these login credentials were actually breached in other breaches, and they were known to be bad. So this is where these people, again, it was a very, very small subset of the millions of people that had data stolen. This was like 1,000 people. Yeah, okay, 14,000 were breached by credential stuffing. The credential stuffing is basically where you take known users and breached passwords in the past and just test them out. The problem with all of this was that the attackers stole the data from other people, not from the credential stuff. Well, I mean, they stole these 14,000 accounts, but because of 23andMe's features, they were actually able to steal the data from people who had not reused their passwords, who had not done bad password practices. So these people, and this is the vast majority of people, again, let's find out how many million. 7 million people. So there are 7 million people who didn't do anything wrong. So when 23andMe says that it was their fault, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. And this is not failing gracefully. And I would still contend that for the password stuff, people, there was more that they could do. There's more. And I'll give you one example of more. Those hashes should be well known. That's how the password stuffers use them. The hashes of their passwords. There are things they could have done. So this is not failing gracefully. I don't think anybody should ever use 23andMe ever again. Fail with some grace. It's going to be an expensive fail, but if you survive it, fails are expensive. That's fails hurt, and that's the reason they're considered failures. But you can learn from them. Or you could say we did nothing wrong and not learn from them and get people to not use you. All right, let's jump into open source. I have a couple things. One thing that I missed from last year, and we're going to talk about it. Is a little bit of Ubuntu news. There's actually 2 pieces of Ubuntu news, 3 pieces of Ubuntu news that I think might be interesting to all of you. So I know that we talked about LXD being brought in to Canonical. Canonical said that they wanted it. We talked about last year about how they were bringing that under their wing. And some people were uproared, some people weren't. I was kind of in the middle ground. I kind of was like, I wish they didn't, but I can also understand from a corporate venture, whatnot, where it can make sense. Well, they've already decided to make some changes. So yeah, LXD changed to the AGPL v3. Now, I'm not personally a big fan of the AGPL v3 because I think that AGPL v3 causes a lot of problems. You'll see a lot of large companies that avoid it with the plague because effectively some of these licenses, you don't know how they'll be enforceable until there's actually been a lawsuit. I don't know if we've actually seen a lawsuit about the AGPL v3 yet, which means some of it might just be that we don't really know how the courts are going to uphold this type of licensing. And that's why large companies avoid it, because it just has too much risk, even though maybe they could use and leverage it. But that being said, a lot of companies avoid the AGPL v3. So I think this is maybe a little bit sad, as it will practically limit the usefulness of LXD going forward. But we'll see what they're bringing to LXDs. I hope that they have a lot of bigger plans for it than just the licensing change. Although, if I had to point out, I think they did it the best way you can do the licensing change. So a lot of companies will force you to basically contribute your code to the project, which means they can relicense or to the owner of the project. But instead, basically, they're just relicensing future changes to the AGPL v3, and all existing changes will stay licensed under Apache 2 going forward. So your contributions that you gave are still yours, and they're still licensed under what you gave them under, which I appreciate, even if I'm not on board with the AGPL v3 change. I can appreciate that. Another one that caught me by surprise, and at first I thought was kind of going down the same path as Red Hat, but I did realize that this was much different. I caught a little glimpse of discontinuing source ISOs. Now, if you remember late last year, Red Hat actually discontinued distributing their sources unless if you paid for Red Hat. Maybe that's GPL compliant. I'm not sure, not a lawyer. But I saw this, and basically this is proposing it, and if you follow it through, you can actually find that they decided to stop supporting the ISOs. This is what got me onto this. But the real thing is not so much that you can't find their sources. You can actually find all their sources individually hosted. What they're doing is they're not making the source ISOs, basically the CD images of it anymore available for download. The argument was made that the mirrors have been doing this for 20 years and haven't run afoul of the licensing, and that they think that this is fine as they're still within the spirit of distribution. And it's still available. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. I don't know. Do you guys use the source ISOs? I have never actually leveraged the source ISOs. I'm sure that this is going to hurt somebody who has some workflow based off of those source ISOs. An interesting note that I learned while digging through this was that these source ISOs were only for the release. So all the security updates and the incremental changes and everything weren't part of these and weren't released. So it was only the single snapshots in time. So I get what it was. And part of this is it was going to be expensive to keep up updating. That was one of the things. They were like, it's going to continue breaking and we're going to have to keep maintaining it. They decided not to. So I don't think this was a big deal, but I think it could hurt somebody if they have a workflow based off of those source ISOs. All right, moving right along. Another piece of Ubuntu open source news. Zagoon will be returning as a Snap developer later this month. Now, whatever your take is on Ubuntu, this is interesting. I'm not a big fan of snaps, but snaps are fairly useful as a centralized. My words escaped me. They just left. As a centralized package management solution for all Linux distributions, that and Flatpak are maybe two of the big ones out there. It's interesting. They kind of use containers in the backend. If you didn't know, they use some of the same technologies to limit and isolate the processes on your system as OCI containers do. Yeah, pretty cool. If you asked me 5 years ago, this was the thing. This was the way forward. Snap was the way for Linux to stop, or Flatpak actually at the time, was to stop having different package managers and just worry about the OS and the packages. Yeah, not to worry about the packages. Let me install them through something like this. I've never found them to be that great. I have my issues with them. They have their use, but I haven't yet. But we'll see. Maybe they're really ramping up the support for Snap, and we'll see how well it works. Maybe we'll have to give it a try on Arch. I don't know. Maybe it will break Arch. Not sure. All right. An article I'm going to let you guys have, published by our favorite Red Hat developer. What's our favorite? That's our favorite. Tenart is our favorite Red Hat developer of the month. Thank you, Tenart, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Anyways, I found this to be quite interesting. Basically, there are places where packets get dropped throughout the kernel that doesn't get reported. There's only one thing to report that. And basically, this was going through and giving recommendations, as well as some of the new updates about where those types of things can be non-core parts of the Linux networking stack, and how packets could be dropped throughout it. And I actually found it super informative. It's not a long read. Like, look at it. It is not that long. But if you're wanting to understand the packets going through the kernel, I think that this is a really great primer, actually. I mean, obviously, you need to know about networking a little bit beforehand. But if not, as long as you know a little bit, this was actually kind of a really interesting read, because I hadn't even realized all of those things myself. All right. Who's ready for some cloud news? Who is ready for some cloud news? All right. So, we had a pretty calm week in cloud news. Now, I found an interesting article. This is one we've actually tested, but this terrifies me. We tested Amazon Q to do coding things. We tested Amazon Q quite a bit. And I didn't know this until I read this article from the news stack. And this was one of their original release features that supposedly we could have used. But Amazon Q transformation technology could assign the Q to task of updating Java project by telling Q to transform it. Basically, they say that you can update Java 8 apps to Java 17 apps with Amazon Q and basically do nothing. Now, I haven't tested this, but we did test Amazon Q, and I'm not going to call them liars, but the Amazon Q that I tried would not do this. Now, maybe we didn't try it with Java specifically. We tried JavaScript and a few others, but I don't think we tried Amazon Q with Java specific. Maybe it knows Java really well, and maybe it's fantastic at it. But everything else we tried with Q, it absolutely failed to respond to us hard. Absolutely super hard. So I'm not sure. Let's move on to some more exciting news. The only news GCP released was that they had top news from last year, which we already covered last year. So we're going to move on to Azure. Azure Stream Analytics no-code editor has some new features and improvements in January that you can start taking use of, taking hold of, taking. You can start taking them. You might have to pay for them, but yeah. So if you're using this, you might want to go ahead and read this. Scott B. Wobble, how are you guys doing? So one of the things that I liked the most about this one was the switch to query editor from the no code editor. So if you were trying to do look for a query that you're going to be able to use, you would be able to switch to it really quickly, which maybe allows you to streamline your workflow just a little bit more. But there were some other ones in there for you to check out. The other thing in Azure was that Azure Spring App Enterprise is now eligible for Azure Savings Plan. I thought this was a pretty big deal. I brought it up because if you're using Enterprise Spring App or Azure Spring Apps Enterprise, the Azure Savings Plan for compute, it can save you a lot of money. So it might be something to check out. So I would definitely go and look at this if you're using that. All right. AWS account discontinues the use of security challenge question. I think this is maybe the biggest news of all the clouds. Starting on January 5th, 2024, AWS accounts will no longer support security challenge questions for accounts that have not already enabled them. This will remove the options for customers to add new security challenge questions from. Thank you. Thank you. Now, if you already had them enabled, you get 1 year. You basically get 1 year. So if you already had them enabled, they will go away in 1 year. So yeah, that's it for the cloud news. Scott B, it's good to see you. How are you doing? Did I miss anything in the cloud news? Did you see anything from your favorite cloud, whether it was Linode, DigitalOcean, Cloudflare? You see anything that I missed? Let me know. Always feel free to bring your own news to these news segments, and we'll do it. You got tumbleweed fixed? That's awesome. All right. Trouter's War. How are you doing? I just finished the news. Now, I have an article that I thought I would read over with you guys. Basically, it's this. Databases in 2023, a year in review. I have a video on databases coming out maybe in February about the different types of databases and when and why you might use those and leverage those databases. But I haven't actually read this. I put it on my docket to read, and I thought I would go over it with you guys, give you my opinion on it. And my guess is that he didn't cover the greatest database that's out there. My audio is very different today. Is there something wrong with it? It has room echo. That's no good. Well, thanks for letting me know. I never know. Audio is one of those things I can't listen to it because if I did, it would go through mine, and then you would. This is what it sounds like if I actually am listening to the audio. This is what it sounds like if I actually am listening. And this, I don't think. Sounds like if I actually am listening. And this, I don't think. Sounds like if I actually am listening. And this, I don't think. And this, I don't think. All right, now I'm just going to do it one more time so I can hear it, but you guys are going to hear it too. All right, now I'm just going to do it one more time so I can hear it, but you guys are going to hear it too. All right, now I'm just going to do it one more time so I can hear it, but you guys are going to. I think that's fine. I'm just going to do it one more time so I can hear it, but you guys. That's a recursion exo. Recursion. Sorry. Okay. Experiment done. Experiment done. I will. A few things have moved around in my room. I've been busy doing some housework this weekend. I'll see if I can't build another sound panel and get some more up. I'm in like a square box, so I'm sure it's probably my audio somewhat. Anyways. All right. So last thing I had for today was this databases in 2023, a year in review. This guy usually has some pretty sassy takes from my past readings, but I thought it would be pretty fun because he gets maybe he doesn't hold any punches. Now, I doubt it. He actually covers the best database out there, which is, I'll have to email him about it. I won't actually email about it because he'd write about me emailing about it. I'm not going to do that. Now, again, in maybe February, hopefully, I've been working on a script for what different types of databases are, when you might use them, what they're good at, and what the underlying data of each one is and why it makes them good at those things so that you actually understand like what a vector database does. I know that everybody will be like, oh, vector databases put the data kind of logically together, but like, what does that mean? How is it doing it on the database, and how does that actually give you anything? That's what I want to cover in that video, and why you might want to use it over a different type of database. Now, again, I say all that. That's going to be a little bit later. So let's get into this. This was clearly the year of vector databases. Not a lie. Vector databases were hot this year because a lot of machine learning thinks that it's the greatest thing out there. Although some of these systems have been around for a couple of years, the widespread interest in LLMs and services built on top of them, ChatGPT, brought them to the forefront this last year. Yep, absolutely. Vector databases promise to provide deeper searches on data, especially unstructured data, based on the data's semantics rather than just its contents. That is, instead of searching for documents that contain exact keywords, an application can search for documents that are related to topics. Hip hop group. Okay. This is actually really true. One of the most surprising things people get with a vector database search when they first use it is it almost feels like machine learning. You search for forest and you get back pictures of forests, which is pretty awesome and pretty cool. Like, it almost feels like machine learning already. Now, obviously, those images had to be tagged and things like that, but it already feels close. Like, you're like, oh, I could just do this and fake machine learning. It's actually pretty cool. The magic that facilitates these types of searches is transformers that convert data into a fixed length, one-dimensional vector of floating point numbers called embeddings. We've heard a lot about embeddings. We're going to have to talk about embeddings because we do databases and machine learning. We'll definitely be talking about transformers and embeddings in more detail this year. The value of these embeddings are indecipherable to humans. That word was difficult for me. Instead, their contents encode some relationship between parameters and the transformers being training corpus. The size of these embeddings vectors ranges from hundreds of dimensions for a single transformer to thousands for high-end models. Suppose one generates embeddings for all of the records in a database using a transformer. In that case, one can search for similar records for a given input by... One thing, I gotta start this over. Felt like a run-on. I think I missed the period. Suppose one generates embeddings for all the records in a database using a transformer. In that case, one can search for similar records for a given input by finding the record embeddings closest to the search embedding in high-dimensional space. I know this was all English. I'm not sure I understood what he was saying. Oh. I do, but not in the words. We can explain this. We can talk about this. We'll come back to this. But brute force comparing all vectors to find the closest matches is horribly expensive. So basically what he's saying is, I guess brute force is the best thing. You could effectively check every record to find the closest search. He's just explaining how maybe you would do it in a NoSQL database. You would just get all the records and check them one at a time. That is the concept that he's explaining here. And it would be horribly expensive. The complexity of this search is O to the N to the D to the K. That almost... O of NDK, where N is the number of embeddings, D is the size of each vector, and K is the number of matches you want. If you don't know what this means, trust me, it's terrible. If you multiply, it's pretty terrible. It's pretty terrible. Don't do multiplication in O to the N. Now, what did we learn? If each of these is 1, this is reasonably fast. If each of these is 1, it's effectively constant time. So remember, this is the growth. This is the growth. The growth of your algorithm. So you can use these in small quantities, and they can be reasonably fast in very small numbers. They just grow quickly. At its core, a vector database is just a document database with a specialized index data structure to accelerate similar search on embeddings. Yep. Instead of... So actually, interesting here, what you'll find out is a lot of these vector databases are just a document or key value database that has a specialized index that you can start using. Some were designed just for that and just support the specialized index, but there are other databases out there that will support these types of things by basically just giving you a special index on top of the file management system. So that's pretty cool. So instead of performing an exact match for the most similar vectors per query, these systems can be used to approximate searches to generate results that make the trade-off of being good enough in exchange for returning the result more quickly. That's it. That's a pretty good summary. What we need to do is we need to actually have a couple live streams on these indexes. I don't know them that well. I need to research them a little and then do at least a video, if not maybe make I know we've made a hash map index on stream, and I know that we're going to do an LSMT tree. I say T and then tree. I know it's redundant. LSM tree. LSM tree. I know that we're going to do that one in the future, but maybe we will. Maybe we'll do this one too. Maybe we'll. All right. After being knocked down by the 2022 crash of blockchain database mumbo jumbo, the VCs took a branching huff of smelling salts and got excited once more. Like I said, this guy. They turned out their money on big funding rounds for almost any and all major players in the vector database game. Blah, blah, blah. Yep, this is cool. Cool. All right, so let's get Andy's take. After LLM became the mainstream with ChatGPT, it took less than 1 year for several DBMS vendors to add their own vector search extensions. So that includes Single Store, Oracle, Rocket, and ClickHouse. Several PostgreSQL derivative systems also announced their support for vector search. Some use the PG Vector extension, while others use open source and libraries. No, I didn't know about Neon. I did know about PG Vector. It's a pretty standard one. And NoSQL. Like I said, it's basically a different index. And a lot of the times, databases can support different indexes. It's just how you index your data. So it's not actually that big of a deal. Now, sometimes it means that if your how you store data on disk doesn't necessarily play well. I tried to explain this in my last database video where we could do B trees, but B trees want their data stored in pages instead of the logs that we do. And that's where we could do a log-based database with B trees as the index, but it just doesn't play as nicely with the data storage. And so sometimes it makes sense to customize your database based off the type of index that you're doing. I don't know that that's true here. I don't know enough about these index types to make a comment on that. So this is a really good take. It surprised me as well. It's interesting to contrast the quick proliferation of vector support across multiple DBMSs with the rise of the JSON data types. Our vector database is similar to the Dewey Decimal System. It's fully boiled. It's fully boiled. I like that. Notice the system that natively stored JSON became popular in the late 2000s, but it took several years after that until the relational DBMSs added support. The incumbents, Postgres, Oracle, MySQL, and does anybody use MySQL anymore? Real question. Let me rephrase that. Does anybody use MySQL on new projects anymore? That's the real question. I don't feel like it is, but right, new, no. I obviously, if you started with it, there's no reason to change. Well, maybe, but the SQL standard added functions to operate on JSON back in 2016, but it did not add an official JSON data type until 2023. I did not know this. What? Wow, we actually have official JSON data types in SQL. I mean, I didn't know this. I knew that Postgres had JSON data types. I knew that. I did not know that Squirrel itself supported it. That's awesome. That's pretty awesome. The SQL standard added functions to operate on JSON data types, but it did not officially. Yeah. This delay is somewhat surprising given that many relational DB. Yeah, okay. This is what I was gonna say. Is a lot of them, like Postgres, has had support for them. So I didn't realize that. Maybe we need to go through this document at some point. Maybe next week. Maybe. There are two likely explanations for the quick proliferation. Sorry about that. Of vector search indexes. The first is this similarity search via embeddings is such a compelling use case that every DBMS vendor rushed out to get their version and announce it immediately. The second is that engineering effort to introduce what amounts to just a new access method and index data structure is small enough that it did not take much work for the DBMS vendors to add vector search. So effectively, this makes a lot of sense. Unlike other systems, it seems like, again, I don't know the index structure that well, but it seems very easy to graph onto databases. Unlike graph databases are much more difficult to graph onto an existing database. There's a little bit more to it. So yeah. Most vendors did not write their vector index from scratch and instead just integrated one of the several high quality open source libraries available. What's fun in that? We're going to write our own. My goodness. That's lame. But if the engineering effort to add reasonable vector search capabilities to a DBMS is low, the danger is that the vector DBMS vendors do not have a large enough moat to keep existing DBMSs from encroaching on their turf. This is true of everything. In 2023, Google stated that they didn't have a moat for LLMs. And the reason is, it's been proven that LLMs maybe are expensive, like they cost a lot to train initially, but they're actually fairly easy to actually do. There wasn't a big barrier to entry. This is why those large companies are really pushing for I'm going to keep it less spicy. But they're looking to regulate it because they want it for themselves, and it's too easy for a startup to do something pretty awesome with it. So the moat is pretty small. This seems to be true about this. From what I know of the database world, Vector is reasonably easy to integrate into an existing DBMS. Relatively easy. I have seen it done on several where it's just been grafted on. Now, I'm not saying that that's as good as a native database that was designed for Vector from the start, but we're going to see how well those can get in the next couple of years. I would actually love to see at the end of next year where those databases stand. Dazo. Vector databases are specialized for storing and searching large vectors. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Ooh, this is interesting. I recently told the co-founders of both Pinecone and Weavite. I don't know this one. I do know Pinecone. That there are two paths their systems could take. I might check that out. The first way is that their customers will still start using vector databases as their database for record, and then vendors will add better support for operational workloads. They will end up looking more like popular document databases, and then in 5 years, they will add support for NoSQL, SQL like the NoSQL systems that preceded them. The alternative path is that vector DBMSs will remain secondary databases updated via changes from upstream operational DBMSs. This is how people use search engine DBMSs like Elastic and Vespa. In that case, the vector DBMSs can survive without expanding their query languages or having a more structured data model. This is actually a fairly well understood process here. Effectively, This is, I wouldn't say this is a hot take or actually anything new. And you can see it in the NoSQL databases like Mongo and whatnot. It's happened all over the place. And the thing is, there's a couple things that happen for these databases. There's a couple things that happen. Let me get something to draw with really quickly. There's a couple things that happen with these databases if you watch them. So these databases, what happens is they'll do something. And we can take Mongo, for example. And they provide some sort of value. For Mongo, it was easy to get up to a gigabyte or two. Don't try to use Mongo past that. Probably shouldn't use Mongo. It's not my favorite. Now, I'm biased. I will admit that fully. I wouldn't use Mongo, though. But we'll use Mongo as the example here. And the thing that happens is that they solve a very specific problem. So these vector databases are going to solve a very specific problem. But then what needs to happen is a company needs more than just the specific problem. They have a specific problem that they need to use, but then they have a general problem that needs solved as well. And what they can do is they can run Mongo for the specific problem and Postgres for their general problem. Or Mongo could adapt to do Postgres-y things well enough, so that the company doesn't have to run two databases. And then which database is the source of truth becomes a question as well. A lot of the times what happens is that this will be the source of truth, and this will kind of dump stuff into here. You'll have your loads. That's actually very common for your column-based databases, your snowflakes, those types of databases, where at the end of day, you'll do your loads into the tables because they don't do writing very well. But your Postgres does anybody, question here, does anybody know why at disk column databases are slower to write than row-based databases? Anybody? Bonus points. I need to get a point-based system on this stream. But it's how they store their data on disk that allows them to read and aggregate like they do. But anyways, so this happens all the time, I guess is what I'm saying. So now you have a very specialized case for vectors. And this happens to be your LLMs and your things like that are sitting out here. What happens with this is they have reasons to still use Postgres. They still have reasons to use their Mongos or whatever it is. And the thing is, the vector databases can either take the approach that they're going to adapt to also support the other use cases, or they're always going to play second fiddle effectively. I don't know what the right option here is. I actually think I prefer this, but there are some companies that would prefer to just use one database. And so the problem for these vector databases in the next couple of years that are only specifically vector databases, what if Postgres adds vector support? What if you can make a table that is a vector table? That's really awesome. Now you don't have a need. Now you don't have a need for this. And we already saw this with JSON support, making you not need Mongo as much. Mongo will argue scaling. Mongo does not scale. Trust me on that part. You do not want to go terabytes or petabytes in Mongo. A couple terabytes, fine. You hit petabytes in Mongo. You do not want to hit petabytes in Mongo. So this is the real scare if there's not a moat. I don't know if that was over-explaining that. But what he's saying is true. I'm now interested in this Weavites interview. What was the answer? Nobody gave an answer. What? Nobody gave an answer. All right. I'll give you guys the answer. Here we go. So, why column-based databases are so slow to insert, to write? This is your standard row-based. So this is name, Merrick, age, none of your business, address. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so yeah, you guys didn't get me to dox myself today. Nice try, though. All right, so this is kind of how a row-based like Postgres operates. And you can think of these are all on the same part of disk. So when you read this record, you get my name, you get my age, you get my address. It's all there. So that's one record. If you insert one, you literally just insert a new one here. Now, what column-based databases do is instead of this, they do this. I know, column base. It was shocker. You guys are shocked that this was the answer, but this will make sense. I promise. Stick with me. This will be the name column. Name, age, address, etc., etc. And now all names are here. Merrick, Bob, Joe, Suzanne, whatever. All names are here. And all ages are here. 81, 11, 31, 12. Now, what this causes is that to write a new record, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 distinct places you have to write on disk. You've got to write here on disk, a new record in the name column. You had to write here to a new record in the age column, which means you also have to read these off disk. You have to write them. You have to lock them. You got to do all of those things for each of these distinct chunks. Now, why you might want that and why people use these for their statistics and whatnot is also because of this. To aggregate everybody's age and get the average age, you just have to read this one chunk. You don't have to get anything else. And even if you want to do it for any name that starts with M, you only have to get these two chunks. Whereas over here, you have to do it. But this is all going to be explained in my database video of the different types of databases and why how they store data on disk matters to you and why it matters and why you should use one over the other. Anyways, that will be coming out maybe February. That was the bonus question. Young and old and nearly dead. So this is the reason that your column-based databases aren't generally written to. They're loaded into at specific times and whatnot. Generally, when people aren't doing their analytic queries and whatnot through it. They take many more writes, whereas this is one write. This is many writes. And you know, very commonly, you have more than 5 columns too. So. SQL keeps getting better. This is something I'm excited about. Honestly, one, I didn't even realize SQL 2023 was finished and came with JSON support, but it really is. It really is. It used to be where, you know, I could argue that you don't start with Postgres or even SQLite. But at this point, I don't think I could even do that. Start with Postgres and only change if you have the need. Only if you have the need. It's actually gotten really awesome. This upcoming year will be the 50th anniversary of the creation of SQL. I did not realize that. This is why people call it squeal, by the way. If sometimes you hear people talk about squeal, we say squirrel here, but sometimes I have slipped up and said squeal. This is why they call it squeal, which is the structured English query language. I don't know why it took the QUE, but, you know, it did. It did. SQL has been the de facto standard programming language for interchanging with databases since the 1980s. Despite its age, SQL usage and capabilities have increased, especially in the last decade. This past year, we saw the latest incarnation of the ISO ICE specification, better known as Squeal 2023 or Squirrel 2023. The update includes many nice-to-haves that deal with frustrations and inconsistencies in various SQL dialects. Any value? Wait. What is this? Oh, all right. Next week, we're going to go over Squirrel 2023. Now I'm saying squeal. It's ruined me. Weeby Wizard, are there no SQL databases that let you swap out the storage engines like MySQL? Kind of, but not really. Usually a NoSQL system is its storage engine. That's like usually what you get. Now, what some allow you to do is swap out what system searches that storage engine. But usually the NoSQL system is the storage engine. Think about the stack of a SQL. If you're thinking about the stack of SQL, there is a storage engine down here. And this is true with Postgres. But then you have like a query engine, you have an optimizer, you have a bunch of stuff that actually happens above that. And we can go into this. I don't have a planned video on this, but we can get into this. And the storage engine is down here. But in NoSQL standards, generally what you're getting is the storage engine. Now, some NoSQL databases, you know, I can speak specifically to Aerospike as a NoSQL, allows you to swap out what you query with. So there are multiple things that you can do. We released a graph query engine. So you can use the Aerospike storage engine with Graph if you like, instead of the key value store that natively comes with it. So kind of, but not quite like you're talking about. Two enhancements to the SQL that further erode the need for alternative database models and query languages are worth mentioning here. Remember that just because SQL specification includes something does not mean that your favorite relational database will immediately support these new features. Very true. Very true. There are needs. So just because SQL, I think something to be very clear about here is that the storage engines are vastly different. Vastly different. So something that Aerospike will excel at is having petabytes upon petabytes of data. It doesn't really matter how good you are at SQL and that the SQL has JSON support. Their storage engines are a little different and they're optimized a little bit differently. Now, again, you should know why you're using the storage engine that you are, but Aerospike will handle that. Whereas I have not seen several petabyte Postgres databases return sub-millisecond results. Haven't seen that. But it has gotten very good. I'm not diminishing the support. Just the storage engine is still a thing. SQL now supports defining read-only queries on graphs. This allows an application to declare a property graph structure over existing tables. Ooh. This example is for a graph in Oracle V23C that keeps track of which people are in which bands. This is kind of cool. Does Postgres support this? We gotta look if Postgres supports this. Looks okay. Apache Age. Cool. I was wondering if they use something like Tinkerpop or something like that, but it looks like cool. We'll have to check this out. It is left up to the DBMS to decide whether to create an auxiliary data structure for the property graph or just keep track of the metadata. You can write graph traversal queries in SQL using the match keyword. The syntax is based on Neo4j's cipher language and is a subset of the emerging GraphQL standard. The following query returns the number of members in a band. This is pretty cool. The only DBMS that I'm aware of that supports the graph feature is Oracle. DuckDB seems to have one. It looks like there's some plugins for Postgres. It's not supported in the base. But I could not get my above examples to work because their supposed syntax is significantly different, and you can learn more about SQL PGQ from the great list of resources. Okay, we don't use Oracle databases here, not here. We don't talk about that. I've never actually used it. Has anybody here used an Oracle database? Like, we all know that they're like the king of databases, but I've never actually talked to somebody that's used one. Okay, I have actually talked to people that have worked at companies that use them, but I've never talked to people that specifically use them. The government. That makes sense. Okay. That makes sense. I knew where all their money had to be coming from. 1999, they had arrays, introduced limited single dimension fixed length array data types. 2003, expanded the functionality to support nested arrays without predefined maximum coordinality. The update in 2023 supports true multi-dimensional arrays with arbitrary dimensions using integer-based coordinates. Cool. This guy's heavily inspired the syntax to provide structural and operational array structs comparable with SQL and orthogonal to its set of semantics. These enhancements allow applications to interact and multi-dimensional arrays entirely in SQL without having to export them, like to a Python notebook. The table below shows different examples of using the MD array data type in a create table statement. My goodness, I have fallen out of SQL. There's so much that came out in 2013. We're gonna have to do a video going over this. I'm gonna have to read over it. The SQL 2023 version is the next stage in the continuous evolution and improvement of the ubiquitous language. SQL is not perfect, of course. And again, SQL is a query language. It's not the database. It's not how the database stores stuff. It's not the database engine. It's not the query optimizer. It's not the index you picked. So there's a lot more that goes into databases than just SQL. Squeal or squirrel, however you like. But yes, it is pretty awesome. Of course, and it is not truly portable since every DBMS has its proprietary features and non-standard extensions. I am personally fond of PostgreSQL's cast operator shortcut. I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's proprietary. Also, to note here, there are people that do stored procedures in their data. Can we just stop doing stored procedures in databases? Can we not do that? It's never been a good idea. Just hot take. I don't know that it's a hot take. Don't do it. So the graph, the SQL graph is a big deal. However, I don't foresee it becoming an immediate death row for graph databases, as there's already several ways to translate graph-oriented databases to SQL. Some DBMSs include a SQL Server and Oracle. There's also like things like Tinkerpop that does this. I believe it's Tinkerpop. Tinkerpop that will do the translation for you. Apache Tinkerpop nailed it. Like I know my databases stuff. Tinkerpop, yeah. So this will take a graph database query and basically translate it out to SQL for you, so that you can basically do graph things if you wanted to. It's not perfect, but adding SQL graph in a DBMS is not as simple as adding support for the new syntax. This is what I was saying. Graph is actually more difficult to add in than vector. Vector seems very, very simple. Like it's just a new index type. That's like, vector is super simple. And obviously implementing a real index is a lot of work and whatnot, but yeah, so it is a hot take. Stored procedures are useful in some circumstances. Okay, I will probably acquiesce that there is some edge case. I wasn't talking about edge cases in general. In general, I don't think that you should use stored procedures. That's maybe the better take. I have not myself personally run into a case where I wish that the code could run on the database. That's not that there doesn't exist. There are several engineering considerations to ensure graph queries perform well. This is not this is not an understatement. If you ever get into graph, you can write queries that will run for days over a small data set. You know, like a terabyte of data, not very large, and you can write really bad queries. But a problem arises with the intermediate results for those joins are larger than the base tables. Yeah. Again, this can be a killer. Don't use stored procedures in CRUD for single record operations. Yes, agreed, Russell. And yeah, again, there's always, almost in any case, somebody can come up to you and come up with an edge case. I had somebody do it for multiple inheritance. I disagree. I still disagree, but You can find somebody to find an edge case where that thing would be useful. 100%. It doesn't mean in general, and a lot of times I talk in general when I'm talking on YouTube and Twitch here, because that's what I'm talking to the general audience. I generally feel like if somebody knows their edge case, then I'm not talking to that person. I'm talking to the person who's like, oh, I can just do some code here on my my database. I'm just going to have it do the stuff. And you're like, that's actually a pretty bad idea in general. Especially because they can be hard to maintain, especially if you do a bunch of them. It can get rough. I bring these optimizations up to say that English is hard. I bring these optimizations up, I think there needs to be a comma there, not to say that existing graph DBMSs implement them, because as far as I know, leading systems like Neo4j, TigerGraph, and others do not. The only graph-oriented system I'm aware of is the embedded Kuzu DBMS from the University of Waterloo. Most relational DBMSs do not implement them. The DuckDB experimental branch. Isn't DuckDB a columnar database? Anything that needs to reference a lot of data and make decisions based on it usually is better for stored procedures rather than pull all data out and push it back. Okay, that's an interesting take. I'd have to think about that one, Russell. You're talking about like almost data mining operations. See, now, I would say those type of operations should be done on a read-only database, like a Snowflake database, type of database, or a columnar. Troubles in the Sea Lion Kingdom. MariaDB was in the news a lot this past year, and not in a good way. We found that MariaDB Corp. Oh. Which is, so there's a MariaDB Corporation, which is separate from the MariaDB Foundation, is apparently a dumpster fire. The corporation backdoor IPO'd through a sketchy merger known as a SPAC, but then the stock immediately lost 40% of its value 3 days after its IPO because the corporation decided to speedrun its way to the New York Stock Exchange and become public. I did not know all this happened. What? I did not know this was a... I missed this. I failed you guys. I failed you guys in the news. Oh my goodness. One second. We got to check out its stock. Oh my goodness. Oh, that hurts. Oh, that hurts. Okay. Well, I didn't know this had happened. My bad. This is why we're covering this article. I don't know what a SPAC is. A SPAC is a weird thing that IPOs without an actual company, but with an intention to buy something in an area. It's totally weird. Okay, yeah, I don't know what a SPAC is. Oh my goodness. Well, that hurt. By the end of 2023, the stock price had dropped by over 90% since its opening. In the wake of these financial problems, the corporation announced 2 stints of layoffs. The first was in April of 2023, but they had another larger round in 2020 in October. The corporation also announced they were killing off 2 products. The history of SkySQL. What the corporate acquired Xpand in 2018 when it was previously known as Clusterix. I visited Clusterix FSO office in 2014 and thought it was a creepy ghost town back then. The large office had that. The history of SkySQL is more complicated. It was originally a separate company providing MariaDB as a service, but then it was merged with Monty Program AB in 2013. Then in 2014, combined with Monty Program AB plus SkySQL, the company became the MariaDB Corporation we have today. My goodness. But in December 2023, the corporation announced that SkySQL is not dead and is back on the streets as an independent company. Okay, so Sky Squirrel is what we're calling it, guys. Sky Squirrel is back. It's a flying squirrel. It's a cousin to the flying squirrel, actually. Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's so much content to cover. What is this? Okay, things have gotten so rotten at MariaDB Corporation that the foundation CEO wrote an article complaining about how their relationship with the corporation has soured since the IPO. So the foundation, the MariaDB Foundation, is soured with the corporation. That's a shame. I hate to see. I legitimately, this is probably the biggest thing that I hate to see, is when there is a foundation that governs the open source project and a corporation that really sponsors it, and I hate to see their relationship souring. That is sad, and I hope that they can actually reboot it. I understand the problems with a floundering company. You know, there's a lot of people that probably spent a lot of time, and so I get it. Who came up with these? Who came up with these names? Yeah, I don't know who came up with these names. Sky Squirrel is good though. I love Sky Squirrel. It's a cousin to a flying squirrel. So I hope them the best. I hope them the best, that they can get their relationship back on track. The savingness of the database customer has changed for the better in the last 10 years. No longer can companies fake it until you make it with flashy benchmark numbers, new query languages that promise to replace Squirrel, or celebrity endorsements. One second. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. A DBS reputation matters more than ever. Yeah. Reputation. This is something that you don't want to squander. It matters a lot. Meme squirrel. This means that it's vital that the DBS... The reason this is, and this should have been from the get-go, that whatever DBMS you pick needs to have a squeaky clean... this is how Vercel shot itself in the foot. Vercel shot itself in the foot. And you know how Vercel shot itself in the foot this last year? Vercel made these new easy DBs, but they partnered with some pretty sketchy DB services that lost people's data. So not only did, and were down, not only did it lose data, but they were also down for weeks. So this was horrifying. This Vercel shot itself in the foot with this, because they should have partnered with somebody that actually had a good reputation. They partnered with some new upstarts, some new things that hadn't actually been vetted. And the big problem here, the big issue here, you know what? And I have avoided talking about databases with you guys because I feel like I am biased. And so, you know, I never talked about them until the hack on MongoDB. And because I thought that I needed to report that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more this next year because things like this happened last year. Vercel made a huge mistake with their partnership. And this is that reputation that you need to care about, because you're taking their data, you're storing it, you're protecting it, you're keeping it secure, you're making sure that it's available, you're making sure that it's durable. You're doing all of those things. And if you fail on those things, it's catastrophic to people. It's catastrophic if my data goes away. That data that I've been collecting for years, that data that I've worked hard to get from customers to trust me with, it matters a lot. And so when you're picking a database vendor, even if it's one of those that you pay to have hosted, understand that reputation's important. So yeah, Russell, the Vercel database, you can look it up. Vercel, I'll post some links to it. You don't take my word for it. I'm biased. The worst part is that the status pages weren't reporting it as being down. You could look on X all over the place. I'll find some of the reports for you guys, but there was a lot of problems with Vercel's data on their database. And they lost people that won't use it, basically. There's a decent number of people that won't use it anymore. Anyways, if you're going to store somebody's data, be good at storing their data. That's all I'm going to say. You're losing your reputation as a database is maybe one of the biggest ways to shoot yourself in the foot. It's hard to come back from that. All right. And before you think big open source insulates you from being a company going under, few DBMS's projects continue on and thrive on when their founding for-profit company fails. This is true. A lot of the times when the big founding company fails, the open source usually that big founding company, like I'll say Myria here, I don't know how much of it is. Usually that's a large percentage of the people that commit to that code base. Usually. DBMSs are hard. There's not a ton of people that actually want to work on them. Instead, there are plenty of examples where DBMSs wither away once the company paying for it, if not all of it, of the development goes away. Rake and Rethink DB. I would argue PostgreSQL as well, but yeah, Rake is now maintained by one person. Yeah, like I said, this is pretty true. We actually covered this in the news, so we'll skip over this. When the FFA grounded all flights in the US because of the system outage. We did actually cover this already. So, running a mission-critical system on irreplaceable legacy hardware with a custom database access library written by in-house developers that have long retired is every database researcher's worst nightmare. Okay, that's worth it. That is... I guess we should give them credit for keeping it going for 35 years. Oh gosh, 20 messages per second, that's it? My goodness. The Null database can do this at this point. All right, this is kind of long. I didn't realize this. Database money stuff. Beyond the vector DBMSs, VC feeding frenzy mentioned above, there was still some activity in the VC space for other types of database systems, but overall, the database funding activity this year was much more muted than in previous years. Automated tuning startup DBTune raised 2.6 million a seed round in Europe. PostgreSQL got some to build database with custom extensions to vote, blah, blah, blah. TileDB announced their 34 million series in the fall to continue building their array DBS. Despite being over a 13-year-old, SQReam, I'm not heard of them. For their GPU accelerator. Oh, so this is an interesting take on databases. GPU accelerated DBMSs, I think that this is not nearly explored well enough. Maybe one of the problems that you'll suffer right now is the GPUs are all taken up for ML stuff. But I think that this is interesting because this actually could open up different index types that actually could be good with GPUs. So I don't know much about this, to be fair. I do think it's interesting, though. I'd love to learn more about it. Neon landed a 46 Series B in August to expand their serverless Postgres platform. And of course, the funding winner again is Databricks with their 500 million series in September of 2023. That is a whole crap of a lot of money. Nice work, Databricks. Nice work. Multi-cloud database provider Avon acquired an AI-powered query rewriter. An AI-powered query rewriter. So does that like take your query and rewrite it to suck less? You suck at queries. We'll rewrite it for you by AI. I think the AI suck a lot, but maybe they got it well. Snowflake acquired 2 startups from my database colleagues. Sisu Data from ex-Stanford professor Peter Bayless. Ponder, based on Molden from Berkeley. I don't know either of these. My goodness. I need to be more up on my databases. My VC friends are telling me that they saw more new company pitches, but wrote fewer checks in 2023 compared to previous years. This trend is across all startup fields. This is true. And the database market is not immune to it, and anything loosely connected to AI LLMs received the bulk of the attention. Although some of the U.S.'s microeconomic indicators for 2023 are positive, the tech industry is still skittish, and everyone is still looking to cut costs. With OtterTune, the customers wanted our database optimizations to be more aggressive in helping them reduce their database infrastructure costs in 2023. I saw this a lot. A lot of times people use Aerospike because they can be cheaper. They can run fewer Aerospike nodes to store the same amount of data and access it just as quickly. So there was quite a bit of that type of stuff coming through the doors for database providers. This is 100% true, where people were trying to eke out as much as they could from their infrastructure. This differs from the company's earlier years when people came to us primarily to improve their DBMS performance and stability. We plan to announce new features. Okay, this is just on their database, the OtterTune. The most expensive password change ever. The OG database Don I almost said Elon Musk. My bad. Larry Ellison was riding high in 2023. It was a banned year for him in an already outstanding career. In June 2023, he returned to his rightful position as the 4th richest person in the world. Oracle stock price. Oracle has increased in 2023, slightly under the S&P 500's return. Larry then went up to Redmond in September for the first time in his life. He appeared on stage with Microsoft CEO Satya to announce that Oracle is now available. We talked about this. We talked about how Oracle's DBMS was now available as a managed service in Azure's cloud platform that nobody uses. Not Azure. I meant Oracle managed service. Later in November 2023, shareholders voted overwhelming to keep Larry Ellison as Oracle's board chairman at age 79. All right. Well, that article was way longer than I remember it last year, but I read it last year all by myself. So he releases this each year. I think it's pretty fantastic to go over. You know, I'm going to put it in the comments for everybody. Go ahead and check it out. Next week we're gonna check out the changes. I'm actually going to look over them beforehand, get a little bit, but the SQL 2023, it seems pretty awesome. So we should definitely, maybe that should be a video. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it as a thing that we record and we'll make as a video. So, anyways, that was a very long article. Sorry about that. My goodness. It was good though. It was good. I like his take. He obviously did not mention the best database that's out there. But I mean, it's too much competition. He can't mention it. It's just too much competition. That's what I'll say. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks everyone that joined. Thanks everybody that's watching this later. I hope you guys like the news. And I will see you guys next time. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope that you guys have a fantastic week going forward. I hope that you had a fantastic weekend, and I will see you guys later in